So, in essence, we're looking at three concurrent limiting factors that really amass into one, and that is to A, put the sex in us, that is, to give us genitals, to stylize an endocrine system around sex hormones and sex hormone function, um, or to supplant, implant the you really could look at the brain organelle and see how all of these devices that could very well begin at the vagus nerve, traveling up to the pons in the brainstem, and working with the limbic system, the amygdala, and then, of course, interacting with the higher mind, the neocortex, the caudate patanum, and other areas that are leading one to this higher status or higher state of being and becoming. But to say that the moral implications of also being bound by and living in the carnal realm at the same time is a torture, right? And that the only inevitable outcome is a way out. And then we have proposition B under the same context or subtext, which is to then create a shame system based around those sexual parts, the physicality. This is a part of the reproductive system. And to say that an entire persona or personality would then be based on this through the moral cast, right, of this ethos, ethics, virtuous system, right, that now there's a meritocracy set up in how you correspond your behavior with this, and now we have something to manipulate, right? And then there's the tertiary or the tritiary third step, right, which would be to then realize that certain laws and legality, policies and procedures, in fact, an entire economic system and a civic arm could be erected while still implying and still fully upholding the main principal tenets that exist outside of this, that do not have anything to do with this, that this higher tier system would be represented in the coterie, the coat of arms. By the way, coterie also refers to a witch's coven. And you couldn't let those druids or those masons get free and say that they aren't doing the same damn thing. Right? So they're just kind of doing this under the auspices of a brotherhood. But see, they were banging each other over the head with these crude analogies of steel, grit, along while the witches, the priests' wives, and those who were left in the towns and the township before they were raped and pillaged by the barbarity of these competing tribes, which isn't the way anything happened. It was completely, you might as well say that it was a game of Dungeons and Dragons, where you had all these systems in play, and it was 100% in under control of this hegemony. So this unseen force, right? That you could go on and you could chase it through the Rothschilds and look at this Thelema and all this other stuff, but the truth is, it's blatantly out in front of your face. So this tertiary third step, this C, would be that you would have to talk around it, the uncomfortable truth, that you would have to base an entire system around this sexuality, and that to suppress it and to not talk about it would mean that only by way of searching out these initiatory programs, right? These occulted programs that are just like the Hellfire Club, anything Mason, anything Knights Templar, anything Mormon, anything Eastern Star, anything witchcraft, anything Druid, anything Warlock. Obviously, it's all dealing with the same pee-pee, caca, poo-poo, um, immature aspects that are alluded to with the Rosicrucian order, right? That you have to transcend the sexual, right? And to transcend the sexual, you have to look into Aleister Crowley's work, where it's like, no, you have to start jerking off and using sex magic in every possible way and defile yourself and basically say F you to any presupposition of God and God force. Well, you're sinning against yourself because God's within you. And even when you say sinning against yourself, they want you to back up into this shame game where now you've done these things. They're unforgivable because now you're back out into the existential, wanting to, doughy-eyed, thinking, oh, I'm going to rejoin into the existential world that is the carnal world before us, and that I still live according to the valuation of your holidays, your religious holidays, your celebrations, and I just can't remove those aspects of myself, um, as if they are features that are now hardwired into the eternal self. This couldn't be further from the truth. That to forget this without needing them to forget it is to take it on, because everything goes on to this higher tier. It's just fuel, right? And it would burn away, but we're being stuck in the first stages of trying to build momentum to where we're able to take off and get past and through this, right? So a death has to occur, literally a death. And it's the death of a time, it's the death of an age. And so that's what we're faced with right now in this month, as we're facing Passover, as the belief, but more so the faith in these systems are no longer holding the platitudes that they once did, right? They're no longer on a tier system. They're no longer held in any regard where anybody really believes this shit. They want money. And they don't even want money. They just want money because that's the valuation. That's the proposition that's put before us. You can't forget about all the other things that I just talked about and that I've talked about throughout countless videos here, unless you got money to this nurturing process to go into this capitalism and meritocracy and deviate off the areas of what true aesthetics are, right? When we talk about form following function and function refracting back into form, and you becoming this more effulgent aspect of yourself through transcendence, well, you still want to hide from that, and you want to buy your Gucci bags. And even if you're living as a minimalist, you want to have several $billion, but you got to make sure that these other people stay in this repressed state, because otherwise you get into the areas of fungibility where you have equal for equal exchange, the mutualism. So what's happening is this system has been set up so that your neighbor, your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, everybody is. So you see where you're trapped is the master key system. In the first, we're talking about Charles F. Hanel, high level degree Mason. You are nothing but a theoretical abstract ego if you don't take on these monikers of a title, right? But if you take on the moniker of that title, you are now having to suppress everyone else into the indoctrination of this system through systematic control, where now you're having to be the Amway salesman or the pyramid salesman that is the underwater paddler, where you want to just move ahead of all. So you're machinating against the very people, right, that you live with, that you live around, that you come in contact with, because the valuation aspect, when you're talking about non-fungibility, right, where now I'm going to secretly come out with this invention that rips off from someone else. It's a rip off from someone else directly. I'm going to come out with this book where you ripped all the information off from someone else, right? But it's okay. It's capitalism. It's meritocracy. You can do that, you know. Um, you came out with a concept or an idea to make things easier on people. No, it was to make yourself rich. Be real. And so what we're faced with is the death of the false self, to where whatever you really believe, whatever you really think, your true motivation is going to be shown as blatantly as the face that you carry around that you cannot hide any longer. And so we're coming into a time that is a revelation, right? And you could look at it like revelations, but you could say that that is one interpretation of this wall that we've been coming to, this firewall, if you will, right? Because everything that I talk about is you'll see people coming from a technocratic sort of state and flirting with the idea that, okay, finally I'm coming to a spiritual presupposition, but I'm going to have to really lead up to that. For me, I start out with the spiritual presupposition. I give merit to the whole thing. And then I go, no, it's very obvious what's happening here. And anything that would go through this routing and rerouting system, in other words, like a lot of the things that Cliff High alludes to in his two-part video today that you can find on Substack, Ether Pirates of the Materium, he gets right into this. It's the fact that when you're talking about spirituality and you're talking about a construct or a structural component to it, that to break beyond this, that is what we started out with. When you presuppose yourself and you are presupposed with genitals, right? Right there, that's the problem. That's the thing everybody wants to stop talking about, but it's the most important, because the true ethics, true virtues, true ethos, right? True morality, true principles are genderless, right? They're genderless. And to align with that genderless aspect, we couldn't, just by saying genderless, it didn't have to realize, it didn't lose its gender and therefore have to realize itself as we are. In other words, for you to come into this mind, it's only the aspect of your true self will be able to transgress or travel beyond this, right? So when you're talking about transcendence, if you were to take out all the sexual legalizations, that's the C mechanism to what I started out with, and you are to look at taking out all of the physicality, that's the A that I started out with, and then all the shaming process, which is the B that I conjectured, right? As to say that you're not going to, whatever you learned from that is what you should have been born with in the first place. And the removal of it leaves a stain on you, right? So that a transcendence has to take place, and a past, when we talk about transgression, right? When the past needs to die away, right? Every religion, every creed, every race, every presupposition on any scale, because it all deals with our sexuality. Don't you realize that? To call someone your child, that's alluding to sexuality. To call someone your parent, that alludes to sexuality. To say, to call yourself a man or a woman, that alludes to sexuality, right? So who are you when not faced, not entered into, not going through the columns in the temple wall, that are hidden behind? That's all sexual. Everything, the Hellfire Club, the Masons, all the apron, that's all poo-poo, pee-pee, woo-woo, sex parts. Who are you really?